Good evening, hello and welcome to MYT Live. I am your host, the owner and the founder of Make a Transition, MYT Paul Nolan, here once again with another live stream from an artist that we love and we respect. So we're going to be introducing you to tonight's guest in a moment. But first, I just want to say welcome. If you haven't seen one of our streams before, again, welcome wherever you are in the world. Hope you're keeping healthy, well and safe. And yeah, this is going to be a fun time tonight. So welcome if you're watching on YouTube, watching on our Twitch channel, watching on Facebook. And we just want to give a bit of a special shout out to our friends at Yoshitoshi on Decoded Magazine, and also obviously for our page tonight with our special guest. So yeah, this is going to be an exciting one. And again, you know, tonight we can drop in comments. Hi Bart, hi Adita, hello Biker Guy, watching on Twitch, who is very excited for this, which is all good. This is excellent to see. And yeah, great to see people on Facebook as well. So yeah, let's get the party started and let's bring in tonight's special guest. So he is someone who I have gotten to know over the last few years. Spent quite a bit of time hanging out with him in Los Angeles because I used to live there before shipping back off to the UK, which, you know, doesn't seem like such a good idea right now. And yeah, he's grown from being an artist who showed some potential into one of the most rapidly rising stars in the melodic techno and more sort of progressive scenes in the last few years. So it's been immensely gratifying to watch this guy grow from his first official remix, which he did for Giorgio Moroder, and then obviously being signed to labels like Mousetrap, Yoshitoshi, our own Chapter 24 records, of course, Parquet recordings, and the list goes on. And this guy has been touring the world and playing some of the biggest and best festivals you can imagine. So without much further ado, let's introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Rinzen. Hello, sir. How are we?
Hey, Paul. I'm doing really well, man. Thank you for such a kind introduction, man. That was some very generous descriptions of my music, and I'm just excited to be here and to be talking to you, man.
Nah, dude, the invoice is in the post for the introduction, dude. Don't worry.
There you go.
There you go. So how you doing? You're in Los Angeles right now, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in my studio in Venice Beach here.
I'm not jealous
where
at
I've
all.
been.
Not jealous at all.
Yeah, Paul's actually been here before. It's a good little spot, a few blocks from the beach, and you know, it's kind of like a ghost town right now, but in general, it's a very beautiful place to be and to be able to work on music.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a beautiful space and it's a beautiful spot as well, you know, just off Abbot Kinney Boulevard there, one of the nicer parts of Venice Beach, shall we say. And such a great spot for creativity. And, you know, it's funny because, like, you're not the only person I've been in that room with, you know. I've worked with Matt Wosley as well, Human Life.
Human Life. Yeah, I mean, this studio has been around forever. And like when I first started working in this building, I was actually like a journalist still at the time. And I actually think that's when I first met you. I was still just a writer. And I was working in like the upstairs loft space, just like helping run a couple blogs. And I knew they had the studio and I could hear them making music. I was like, that's where I want to be.
Why am I upstairs? What am I doing up here?
I don't want to be doing this. I want to be doing what they're doing.
Why am I reviewing other people's records? I want to be writing my own.
Honestly, exactly that. And eventually a space in the studio did open up and I just like claimed it right away. I was like, yes, I see my opening. I'm taking it. And I've been here ever since. And that was maybe like 4 years ago or something.
Wow, was it that long ago? Wow, my God. Yeah, that takes me back, man. That takes me back because obviously the first time we met, you came over to what was at the time my studio.
Yeah, and Village Studio, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly where we were doing the Sasha album. Yeah. Back in 2016.
Yeah, you were working on. Was it Scene Delete? The album you were working on?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. The Late Night Tales album. Oh my God, what a beautiful album.
Thank you,
I remember showing you like some of my songs then, and like I think I had just come out of like Icon Collective, the music school here, and like they were still very like early ideas, and like, you know, it was nowhere close to putting them out into the world. But I remember, yeah, you were able to give me some good feedback, and also just like I'd never been in an insane studio like that. So it was just a cool experience to be hanging with you and to be able to see that studio space and like hear a little bit of the Sasha stuff.
Yeah, it was. It was great. It was great to invite you in, because like what was great was when Sasha had to go out on tour, or if it was like the weekend or something like that, I had that space to myself. So you know, I could literally just get on with doing like some of my own stuff, and you know, experimenting with just some of the absolutely, quite frankly, insane amount of gear we had in that room at the time.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was so funny, because it was like we were, that room belonged and still belongs actually to Harry Gregson Williams, the film score composer.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he did. He mixed movies like The Martian in that room.
No way. Wow, yeah.
So where Sasha was subletting the studio from him because he didn't need it for a while.
Yeah.
And we just like, he was horrified, like, because we just ripped everything out. Like we just unplugged everything, and we had this like huge Pro Tools desk in there, and we just used it like an amp. Basically, we didn't use Pro Tools at all. It was just like a volume control for the speakers, and like a kind of a table we were using to rest various drum machines and synths on. But it's funny, man. It's a great place. It's an amazing. It feels like home to me in LA. That place, the Village. It's just got such a great vibe to it, you know.
Yeah, I like the idea of creating music in a room that other artists have also created in. It's like there's a little bit of like pixie dust or magic left over. It's like maybe they came up with this brilliant idea, or they finished their album in it. And I don't know, I feel like maybe subconsciously there's a little bit of that like floating around. Like even in this space here, like it used to be DJ Harvey's spot like a long time ago.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, him and his engineer worked out of here, and like I'd like to think there's a little bit of like Harvey magic still in the walls or something, or in the building.
I would imagine so, because that, if you've ever met that dude or like even been to see him play, you know, that cat's kind of like, he's not on this wavelength.
He's pretty out there.
He's in a good way. He's like elsewhere. If you get me, like he's cosmically on like a different plane. Really. And it's the same with the Village as well, you know, because like you feel the history working in somewhere like that. And it was quite amusing actually watching, like, you know, walking in to start work of a morning, and it was quite amusing the first day that we started in there, and it was watching Sasha get a little bit starstruck. And I was like,
seeing the names on the walls, seeing the plaques.
This is strange. Like, this is strange.
Well,
watching...
But I'm sure you walk by and it's like Fleetwood Mac or something's up on the wall, or Snoop Dogg or something, and it's like, holy shit, these are the people that have recorded here,
dude. And then like you get into the stories of like, you know, Smashing Pumpkins doing Melancholy there, and and the history of the place is incredible, without going into sort of too deep into it, because it's just such an iconic building. And like it fell into like wreck and ruin in like the sort of the 70s and 80s, and for a while it was actually like it descended into being like something of a crack den.
Oh, really?
It really did. Like, and then Jeff Greenberg, the guy who owns it now, who used to be like a very high up person at the Greek Theatre, he took it over and sort of like restored it to its former glory. And the Smashing Pumpkins album was a massive part in that, because at one stage he was telling me, Jeff, and he's just this really eccentric kind of like older dude who's still like, you know, got really long hair and like flies around in like, you know, Porsches and stuff. Like, he's hilarious. Like, he's just zero fucks given on any scale. But he was telling me like the stories of like the way that it worked with the Pumpkins for that album, and he was saying at one stage every single room in the whole building was being used for that album. Like, they had like strings being done in one room. They had like drums on. You know, it was just like they took the whole building at one stage. So it was crazy. So I definitely believe that the atmosphere of the space that you work in is very very important, and it's something that we don't really talk about a lot, right?
I think the nice thing for me too is like, this is a place that's separate than my home, so I'm able to come here, and like just the act of traveling somewhere, I think, to go create, it kind of sets you up to be in the right headspace. And it also allows you to that when you leave that space, you can transition into like a normal, just like, oh, I'm gonna wind down now. This is nighttime. I don't need to be working right now. I can shut off my creative brain for a few hours. So that's been a huge blessing just for the past few years. And obviously, I know that's not possible for everyone to have a separate studio. And some people I know have really amazing bedroom studios, or they have another room in their house. So I think the important thing is about finding some kind of separation where, you know, like, this is where I'm going to create. And if it's in your bedroom still, maybe it's just like, oh, I'm going to only create during these hours. And then after that, I'm not touching it at all. But I feel like you need something that can kind of separate your days or compartmentalize it a little bit, because otherwise you're in a constant state of like, oh, I should be working now, but no, I'm going to go eat something from the fridge. Then I'll do some more work. And then you're like half working the whole day. And then, I don't know, I much prefer to like get some really deep hours in, then go home and just like don't think about it.
Yeah, that's tough, because like for myself, like, you know, I have a dedicated space in my house. And it's tough. Like it's really tough, because you never feel like you're truly like off the clock. That's a challenge,
exactly.
You know, especially when you're running a business at the same time. You know, it can be challenging.
Yeah, that's the hard thing for sure. And I know you're a fan of the guy Cal Newport, who wrote like Deep Work, among some other things. But I've taken a lot from that book, and just like, you know, even let's say you only have 2 or 3 hours to create a day. It's just like making sure that during those hours you are only doing that. You know, you're not producing while simultaneously texting and checking email. It's like when you're doing that, you're eliminating all distractions. Like I go as far as I turn off my Wi-Fi, I put my phone at the back of the room. I'm like, for these hours, I'm not going to worry about getting back to people. I'm just going to do this and do it as well as I can. And that I think you can do no matter where you are, you know?
No, absolutely. Yeah. So do you have like a set routine that you kind of stick to every day?
Yeah, well, not normally, because normally, let's say like 3 months ago, I'd be kind of traveling every weekend or every other weekend. And then like, you know, Monday, you're like getting back and you're tired and you're trying to get in your routine again, but you're catching up on sleep. But now, since I haven't had to go anywhere, I've had a very strict routine for maybe the first time in my life. Just like I'm able to get to the studio the same time every day, and, you know, able to kind of leave generally the same time. Obviously, little things come up, and the routine isn't always exactly the same. But in general, this has been the most like regimented I've ever been in like my whole life.
I think if you sort of whisper it quietly, a lot of artists are like secretly loving this whole thing, because it's like, this is almost like you know that old saying, like staying in is the new going out.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, how many producers are introverts and like this is their dream? We're like, oh, what do you mean I don't have to leave my studio space for like the next 2 or 3 months? Like, I could just work on music and like choose when I want to see people. I'm not forced to get on an airplane, I guess. But I don't know. I also do really miss the traveling aspect and being able to like go to new cities and you know, just to perform. Like that's something that at least now I really am starting to crave again.
Yeah, I think it's been kind of long enough, right? I think you get through this whole thing of initially it's a bit of a shock, as it was when everything was like kind of shut down. And then you kind of go through that sort of like little mini phase in the middle where it's like, oh, this is actually really good. And then a few weeks after that, you start getting like the itch again, right? And it's like, oh, you know, I could kill for a gig, or, you know, a jam session, or, you know, you start like hankering for those things that you've gotten used to losing out on for a while, right?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is even just missing like the connection that you get from going to a gig. Like you get to meet new fans, you get to, you know, maybe you're hanging with a promoter, or maybe you have friends in that city who you haven't seen in years. And like there's all these aspects of connection that like we're so isolated right now that we're cut off from all that. So I think a bit of it is just, wanting to see more people again. And like, you know, I love all the friends I have here, and I feel very grateful to have close friends around me. But I still am itching for that kind of more broad connection.
No, exactly, because it's something that you almost like not take for granted, but it's something that becomes, it's just part of your reality at that stage, especially in the line of work that we're both in, you know?
Well, I think we all took it for granted, kind of like what we had. Like we were able to travel at any moment to any city and perform, and we're able to do that on like a routine basis, and like what a luxury that was, and what a kind of insane life that was. And even I was just only beginning to experience that, but it makes you realize that can all be taken away like in a second. And I think going back, it is going to make, at least personally, I'm going to feel more grateful that, I get to go to, New York again. I get to one day go to London again. And how special that's going to be, knowing that that's not always possible.
No, absolutely. I mean, even for me, I felt like that kind of gratitude in a weird way, even when I lived in Los Angeles, because you know, I was touring about quite a bit, especially off the back of the Sasha album, and it was great to see America and, like you say, playing New York and San Diego and other places where I played. But I'm also, because I'm a European boy, I'm also used to, getting on a plane at Liverpool airport and then flying for 55 minutes, and I'm in a completely different country. Like I'm in Amsterdam or somewhere else, like 2 hours and I'm in Berlin, you know? It takes me more time to get to London than it does to get to these cities, I like sat here thinking, it's going to be a while before we get to go to these places again.
Yeah, I mean, especially internationally, I think that's going to be really tough. It's so interesting to me, like when it's going to be okay to perform again, and even like what the public temperature will be about performing. Like, there was that Resident Advisor video with like Rinzen performing, and like people were socially distanced, and like most people are like, oh, that looks really safe and fun and like something I would enjoy. And then there's a contingent of really angry people being like, oh, like we shouldn't be gathering at all. Like even though they're 6 feet apart, they're still gathering. Like that's still a big no. So it's just, and I'm not trying to take a side either way, but I think it is interesting as we open back up, and especially as DJs, as we start performing again, we are going to face scrutiny no matter what, even if it's a year from now and we're performing at like a 500 person show. Like I think there is going to be that element now always. And that's kind of a scary thing as a performer. Like, I obviously want to do this as safely and responsibly as possible. So it's just interesting to think about what it's going to look like as we open back up.
No, it is definitely. I mean, I think for sort of my personal opinion on it is, I think the scene will be driven predominantly by local grassroots scenes again. Smaller parties, more intimate gatherings, maybe even like and like you were saying, like 500 would be like maybe like a bigger event, because I can't really see a path for a while for the for the bigger festivals. I can't really see a path for them for the next year.
Yeah,
really?
Well, it's like the club thing. They did the club thing from the Resident Advisor video. It's like they had little dots on the ground, and each one's like 6 feet apart, and people are like standing on the dots. But like trying to think of them doing that at like a festival main stage, it's like that'd be pretty insane and really hard to manage.
Oh, dude,
but I think you're right though. It's going to be a lot of smaller parties. I think it'll be a lot of outdoor parties. It's like now that we've kind of collectively agreed, it's much safer to be outside than in a tiny confined space. I could foresee like just more outdoor events, which that part I am excited about, because like I love being able to play outdoors or in nature or whatever it is. Yeah, especially with the fact that you do that quite a lot for festivals over there, like Desert Heart and Lightning in a Bottle and things like that. Yeah, totally. Except like Lightning in a Bottle, that would have been last weekend. It would have been this epic outdoor one, but they did the digital festival thing, and you know what? It was still cool. It was the best we could do.
No, exactly. And I've been actually like really loving your live streams, because you're doing it in such like you're doing it the right way, because it's like you're making them visually appealing. You're playing some like live synths on top of it. You kind of like you're making it a visual as well as an audible experience. Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, you wouldn't say that if you saw the very first stream I did, because when I was still figuring it out, I just had my laptop on top of a speaker pointed down at me. And it was the most rudimentary setup, and like it was just me kind of learning it. And like every stream since then, I've put in more time into developing the setup, and even bringing in like I've started using my Moog Sub 37. That's something I've never done before, and I just realized like,
oh, you know what? I could just plug this into like my mixer and I could perform on it and it would work. I could use the reverb from the DJM 900, send it to the synth, and now it sounds spacey. And it's just, something I've never done at a gig or anything, but I'm here in my studio. The synth's already here. I just thought I'd try it, and now it's become like an essential part of me performing. Like I want to take this thing on the road now. I want to like, or at least where it's when possible, and it's kind of opened me up to the idea of being able to perform and jam like while I'm mixing, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And it'll take you away from that whole thing that DJs do where they look like the buttons are hot.
Yeah, they're too hot. They're too hot.
Yeah, exactly. Like
the filter's so hot.
What, like the Feddy Legrand DJ mag stream that time? Did you see that?
No.
Dude, it looked like it looked like the mixer was the temperature of like a McDonald's apple pie. It was just like, every few seconds it was just like, dude, what are you doing? And the track just wasn't like changing the sound at all. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's such an interesting thing, and that's kind of what streaming has made a lot of us realize. It's like it's not that visually appealing to watch someone mix. Like they're doing a lot technically, but if you're not a DJ, you don't really care about like them doing precise EQ movements, or like doing this big filter sweep. Yeah, maybe it sounds cool, but like the actual technical aspect of, I'm gonna move the high up like 0.3 dB. Now it's a little bit brighter. That to someone just watching, that's not really anything appealing.
Yeah.
So part of it was like, what can I do that's a little bit more visually engaging, a little bit more live and more fun? And yeah, I think synths are like a great way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And it was great to see you on a few of those streams do that. And then for me, the other streams that I've enjoyed personally, shout out to John Monkman, because John's been doing a lot with the visual aspect as well, and he's been doing little bits with projectors and stuff, and that just kind of took me back to that like chapter 24 party we played at ADE together last year, which was so much fun. And, we all played that together.
Yeah, I have a distinct memory of like showing up to the party in Amsterdam, and like you were on the decks, and like people were just going insane in that room. Like they were crawling on the walls.
They really were. There was one stage. There was one stage where literally the bar staff were like pouring mezcal into people's mouths from the balcony.
Like no one was hanging from the ceiling, but I could have foreseen people just like hanging from the ceiling. I don't know. It was just absolutely insane in there. And then I remember you played Rufus de Sol Inner Bloom, and like maybe it was some edit or something, but like everyone was singing along drunkenly, and it was this big moment. I was like, damn, I gotta follow this. Like
yeah, sorry dude, I'm not a very good warm-up guy in those types of situations. I get a little bit too excited. Do you know what I mean?
You nailed the vibe, and like people were loving it.
Oh yeah, it was great, man. That was such a great thing. And like people don't realize that night we actually, because we went from like 4-5 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
but I mean, you went to another party after you played, and it's like, dude, we didn't finish till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Like it went on for like nearly 12 hours.
Almost hours. Yeah.
I ended up playing like 5 hours across the whole thing. I played first, and then I handed it over to Robin Schellenberg, and then Daniele Di Martino, and then I went on again, and then you went on, and then John went on, and then I had to finish it off. It was insane. It was so fun. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get it this year, but we'll always have last year, and subsequent years I'm sure we'll have it in 2021 for sure.
That's kind of what I've come back to. It's like, obviously it sucks that so much has been canceled, but like, things are eventually going to come back. We're still going to be able to perform, and it might take a lot longer than we want to, but that's okay. Like we're all in it for the long haul, and and
it gives us a chance to miss it. I mean, a change is as good as a rest, as they say. So
true.
I think we're going to get a hell of a lot of amazing music from it. We're going to really savor the moments that we get to have together. So look, let's focus on the positives of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So cool. So you've been obviously working a lot in the studio. You've obviously got a track out. Is it tomorrow? It's out on Yoshitoshi, or is it already out?
Yeah. No, it's out tomorrow. So I guess it'll be out, midnight your time tonight. But it's a track called Lotus Eater. Yeah, it's on Yoshitoshi, Sharam's label here in the US. I've started working with them maybe about a year and a half now. And it started with this track called Cork that I did with Enamor. That one did pretty well. And then I ended up sending them an EP. We did my EP, The Odyssey, with them earlier this year. And then this is kind of the continuation of that. It was like originally kind of part of the EP. And then we're like, you know what, this is kind of like a stronger dance floor track. It's like a little bit heavier, a little bit more techno. Let's just do this one as a single and kind of separate it into 2 releases. So it's like a track I've been playing out a bunch in my performances for maybe the past 6 months or longer. I think especially when I get to do kind of more like peak time performances, or maybe if I'm, you know, playing with another DJ who's more techno leaning, I'll play it. So it's been nice to be able to have it in my own sets and just keep playing it for a long time, and then you get to put it out after that, and your fans are already a little bit familiar with it. So yeah, I always like that.
Yeah, and to be working with a label like Yoshitoshi that just has such a heritage and such a lineage, if you will, because, you know, I could go up to my loft and just pull out all the Yoshitoshi classics, you know, on vinyl from years and years ago. So, you know, the fact that it's continued on the way it has done and it's embraced new talent the way it has, I think is a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, I think Sharam is like very open-minded. I think, you know, he's really good about supporting new artists and just always kind of looking for stuff that's a little bit different, all still in kind of like the melodically leaning house and techno space. But I think he's just got a really good ear, and it's been cool to, like, as you said, watch the label, which has been around for so long, just kind of evolve and develop. And I'm stoked to be part of their family and to be releasing with them for sure.
No, absolutely. And you've obviously had you know, quite a few tracks out on various different labels in the past as well, or in the recent past. You've had the Parquet release recently as well. I met Soli actually in Amsterdam when we were just there, and I'd done one track prior, and I think they're just like a really solid, just consistent label out of Germany. It's like you can always check their new releases, and you kind of have a sense of what it's going to be, and it just really delivers for like that melodic house and techno stuff, especially with a little bit of a darker edge and just really well produced stuff, like really just good club tools. So yeah, it's been awesome to work with them as well. I kind of like you know, working with a few different labels. I feel like each label kind of caters to a slightly different audience and maybe has, you know, different fans, and especially like it's nice coming from the US to be able to work with European labels like Parquet or, you know, Chapter 24 or Steyoyoke or whatever it may be, and you know, start to build some kind of European fans as well. So yeah, it's been a cool process just to work with all these different labels. And that was like a really satisfying part of the journey, you know, knowing that we'd sort of sat together a few years back in LA, and then subsequently, you know, we ended up signing some stuff for Chapter 24. That was just like, it was a beautiful like moment of, oh, the circle's kind of completed itself. We've come full circle, you know?
Yeah, it's true. And even the track I did with you guys, Temple, it was like my top selling track, or like highest selling track on Beatport. It might still be, I don't know, but like it really did well. And grateful to you guys for signing that and releasing that one.
Well, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And as I say, you know, you sort of fit right in as part of the family, dude, in more ways than one. So yeah, long may it continue. So in terms of, obviously, because another thing that you're really well associated with is obviously with Mousetrap as well. How did that get started? Because I remember when I saw that you were signed to Mousetrap, I was like, wow, this kid's not messing around. Like this kid's for real. Like.
Yeah, well, so I had just started my project, and this was about 3.5 years ago. You know, I just like publicly launched it. I had done a remix for Giorgio Moroder, and that kind of like kicked my ass into gear. It's like before that, I wasn't really planning on launching my project yet. A remix opportunity came about. I did it. They liked it. They put it out, and I'm like, all right, I guess this is real. We're doing it. So I was sitting on like a bunch of original material, and like, you know, I'm coming off this remix. I could send this to anyone. Like, what direction do I want to go? I want to make a big impact, but I want to work with like a label that's very credible and could like release my music properly. And Mousetrap was just kind of the one that made the most sense to me at the time. You know, they were really big in North America and had, you know, something of a global presence too. I could see them starting to lean in more to the house and techno space. And they just had a history of like breaking new artists. So it just made sense for a lot of reasons. And I happened to know one of the artists on the label Black Gummy at the time, and I had become friends with his team, like his managers. And I was talking to them, and I just mentioned, I was like, oh, by the way, like I have this track. I think it could be a good fit for Mousetrap. Like, do you think you could like pass it on? And they were like, yeah, man, like no problem, we'll do that for you. And I kid you not, like the next day they're like, hey, Mousetrap's signing that track. I was like, oh my god. Like it's not supposed to be that easy.
Right.
But I think it was just a combination of like having the right track at the right moment and having a person who could pass it on. And I think a lot of things just worked in my favor timing wise at that moment. And I was able to do like my first single or first release with Mousetrap, and that started the relationship. And I had more music to send to them. I ended up doing a few EPs with them, and it just became like a nice kind of symbiotic relationship. And I think the nice thing about them too is they really, for one, invest in their artists. Like if you release with them, it's pretty likely they'll put you on a few shows. Maybe you'll end up opening for deadmau5 or stuff, or they'll put you on their radio show. They kind of built this whole infrastructure around the label where it's not just like, hey, we're going to put out your music and that's it. They want to put out your music and also have you involved in these other parts of the label. And that was something that was really attractive to me and that I really am grateful for, because it really, especially putting me on the road with like deadmau5 and some other Mousetrap artists, those were like some of my first shows, and it really kind of threw me into the performance space. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they've been wonderful to me. I have nothing but nice things to say.
No, I mean they're an amazing organization to work with, and you see so many artists have that kind of relationship to Mousetrap and how they become part of that entire ecosystem.
Yeah,
which I think is a fantastic thing. And again, like with Yoshitoshi and to a lesser extent with us, with Chapter 24, we're always looking at ways to be able to support newer artists who are coming through, and that does definitely give you that jump start to another level for sure. Yeah.
I think it's always important to me when thinking about labels, thinking about like yes, I want to release music with you, but like, is there potential for us to do even more? Like, are you throwing shows, or like, can we collaborate on other things? Like another label I've started working closely with here in the US is Desert Hearts. And more specifically, they have this like darker offshoot, Desert Hearts Black. And that's been so wonderful because like I've made music with some of the guys, we're putting out music on the label, but then we'll go and tour together. And now we're doing live streams together, and they have this like community built in and all these other things. It's like not just the record label. And I think, you can't always find that, and that doesn't always make the most sense. Like maybe sometimes you're releasing a track and it's purely a club tool and you just want to find the label that's going to service it to the best DJs and get it in the best hands and give it the best chance of doing well on Beatport. So, I mean, a lot of my releases are more in that lane too. But I think in general, I like finding labels that do have a community kind of built in, or some of that infrastructure kind of built into the label as well.
No, absolutely. I think the concept of community is something that, not to sort of skew it back to what's going on at the moment, but, that's going to be the thing that will get us through times like this. But also as well, it's always something I say to new clients, when they work with us at MYT, when they ask like, what's the best way forward? Do I automatically try and get stuff signed to like big labels and stuff? And often we say to people like, what you need to do first and foremost is like get your team together and get your crew together and build, like, for want of a better expression, build like a little bit of a tribe around you.
Yeah,
and then that's going to be one of the big catalysts, and then you can start to throw parties, you can maybe even start your own label, and that sort of supportive community of people are going to be the ones who become like your, that 1,000 true fans kind of theory. They're the ones that are going to buy everything you make, they're going to come to your gigs, they're going to buy tickets, they're going to travel, they're going to buy the merch, they're going to be those types of people. So again, being able to plug in like you have done into like not so much a ready-made community, but to be integrated into a community like that is very powerful and a great catalyst for you in your career.
Thank you. It has been just like a nice boost in general, and also I think just it's allowed me to connect with a lot more artists, which I think is a really big thing. It's like, on the one hand, you have the collaborative aspect. You can make tracks with people. But like the artists I've met through Mousetrap, you know, they've ended up becoming good friends of mine, and with other labels as well now, like Desert Hearts. And now it's like these are the people who I can hang out with, but also we can send each other ideas and kind of push each other. And like you're saying, building that tribe around you, I think building kind of some close artist friends who you trust, and you know, if you shoot them a track, they're going to give you good feedback that you can kind of like rely on. That's so important. It's just like having other people around you who are on the same journey and who are going to push you, and like maybe you see them do something really cool and you're like, ah, damn, I kind of want to do that. And it lights a little fire under your ass. And I think that's a good thing.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, exactly. Especially because as well, like obviously because we can't be around each other at the moment, having that kind of like online community to like push each other, I think is hugely important. So I'm also taking that as a cue to pull my finger out of my ass and work on my end of our collaboration. Which you've been waiting for about 5 months, but like, we won't go there.
It's all good. Yeah. I mean, you know, collaborations always take time, and like we're all doing things, so I never want to like pressure the other person into finishing something, you know.
Yeah, I'll put some time into it in the next few days. It's not as if I've got anywhere to go or anything to do, so I may as well bust the session open and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that was a fun session. So in terms of obviously, like, you know, again, great finding communities and everything else, but you do have to have the music to sort of go with that. So in terms of your musical approach, you know, how does that sort of begin for you? Like, what's the setup? You know, what kind of, what are you trying to do here? Like, what's the core kind of message that you're trying to get across?
Yeah, I think I've always been attracted to music that kind of puts you in a different space or a different world. It's like you turn on a track and instantly there's like a feeling. And it could be as simple as there's some cool effect or sound design that sounds very otherworldly or, you know, very cinematic. Something that, and maybe it's just like escapism, and it comes from me loving films or video games or something, but like something that kind of transports you to a different world, if even only for 6 minutes or 7 minutes. I kind of like that idea. It's like you're writing music for this like fictional landscape or this fictional story. And yeah, I think that really inspires me. And I like imbuing that into my music. Like, yes, I'm going to write something that I can DJ with and perform with, and it's going to sound good on a big speaker system in a club or at a festival. But beyond that, I want it to be something that's like really engaging, that, you know, has these interesting moments to it, or has some like dramatic tension and release, or these cinematic elements that maybe you would normally hear in like a film score or something. I think that's kind of like my approach in general. Yeah.
So is there any sort of specific sort of film soundtracks or films that you kind of take that cinematic reference from, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, like obviously the obvious ones like Vangelis and the original Blade Runner score. That's probably my favorite score of all time. And you can still, I was literally listening to that like 2 days ago and just marveling at the fact that it still holds up. Like there's this song Blade Runner Blues where he's just kind of jamming out and playing the CS80 and playing these beautiful melodies, and it's just 10 minutes of him just doing these nice little melodic lines, and there's not much else happening, and it just still sounds so beautiful and futuristic despite being 50 years old or something insane like that. Maybe it's only 40 years old, but either way, I think that soundtrack has been really big for me inspirationally. I think the obvious ones, you know, like Hans Zimmer and Interstellar, obviously, and Inception, and even like John Williams. Obviously, he's like the classic composer, but I'm just such a fan of his work. Like Memoirs of a Geisha,
great score.
That is, probably like my second favorite score of all time. And like I wrote a whole EP, Forbidden City, that was like directly inspired by that. And I don't know, it's like I find myself so often like watching a movie and then like really paying attention to the music, and just like often coming out of that with immediate inspiration, being like, what I just witnessed and heard is now like in me, and I feel like instantly I have just like creative energy to put into something. So
yeah, I've got to say, like, because Adita's just put up on the comments here, like, Arrival, like the
oh
soundtrack
yeah,
for Arrival.
Johan Johansson. Oh my God, I distinctly, also one of my favorite movies of all time, but I distinctly remember seeing that film in theaters, and just like there's the scene where you're flying in from a helicopter and you see like the egg-shaped kind of alien vessel for the first time, and it does this sweeping panorama around it, and then you have this like crazy Johan Johansson score at that moment of like this gripping dark bass sound, and it sounds gigantic, and you're seeing this panoramic landscape view of the alien ship, and like I was freaking out in theaters. I was like, the gravity of this moment and the beauty of it. Yeah, it was so inspiring.
That is one of the movies that I sincerely regret not seeing on a big screen. Yeah. Like, I watched it on a plane. Yeah. I mean, it still blew my mind on a plane on like a 3-inch screen. And I remember watching it at the time going, oh, dude, I've missed a trick here. But one of the things to bring this whole thing together, it's like if you've got Arrival, you've got Denis Villeneuve, you've got Blade Runner, and Hans Zimmer as well, like we've already mentioned. Personally, I think one of the most underestimated, underestimated scores of recent times is actually Hans's Blade Runner 2049 score.
Yeah, that's such an interesting one to me, because I know a little bit of the backstory. Like, he was put on it really late. He only had something like 3 or 4 weeks to do it. I think I came into it expecting Vangelis and that level of kind of futurism and that level of experimentation and that diversity in the soundtrack. And Hans did some brilliant work, but I felt like it was all kind of a similar palette. And to his credit, for the film, it worked really well, and it was perfectly matching like the landscapes. But I think my expectations internally were off, and I was looking for some of those huge melodies from the original. And you had a little bit, I think, of Tears in the Rain in the last scene. But I don't know. I also, it's like so hard to judge or say anything because we don't know the situation. Again, if he only had 3 or 4 weeks to do a whole movie score, like, shit, it takes me 3 or 4 weeks to finish one song. Like, I can't, like, who am I to say anything? So, like, for what he did, it was freaking incredible.
Oh, dude, I mean, yeah, because, like, that's again, like, as you know, I've worked with some of the sort of bigger names in film scoring in Hollywood as well, like, from my time living in LA, and it used to boggle my mind that, I used to sit there and watch Junkie XL, like, rescore entire movies in, like, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's like, how the hell do you do that? Like, Junkie, he did a movie called Black Mass with Johnny Depp. And he literally stepped in and rescored the entire movie on 2 weeks' notice.
Oh, my God. Like, I can't even fathom that. Like, we freak out about when we have to send in a pre-master to a label because we're like, oh, my God, this is going to live online forever now. And we're sending in, like, a 6-minute pre-master. Imagine turning in a film score and you're like, this is forever going to be the film score for the next, people are going to watch this movie for X amount of years. And I have 2 weeks to create an hour of music or whatever it is.
And that's if it gets accepted. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, I'm, the old school breakbeat band called Hybrid.
Yes. Yeah.
They did a lot of work in LA doing film scores because obviously it had such like a cinematic sound, and like I'm really good friends with the Hybrid guys, Chris in particular, and he would tell me stories of like they'd be working on like a Michael Bay movie, and they'd like literally stay up for like a week, like no sleep, and they'd score like 45 minutes of music for this movie, and Michael Bay would walk through the room and go, "It's terrible, delete it all, start again."
Oh my God!
And just walk out the room, and like you're back to the drawing board because you're trying to facilitate somebody else's creative vision. It's tough. Yeah. It's a very tough gig.
I think as music producers, we tend to romanticize the idea of film because it's like, oh, we can just put our music to a film. We can just give them the song, they'll make it work. But it's not like that at all. It's like, like you said, there's a hierarchy of like bosses that you have to please with the score, and it has to like get accepted. And they make a small editing change in the scene, and now your song is like a couple seconds off, and you have to totally rearrange the rhythm or whatever to match it. It's just I haven't even done any of it, and it sounds so challenging and convoluted.
It really is, because it's like trying to hit a moving target, because the cuts are always changing all the time. I mean, even myself, like, you know, I've never done a feature film. I've just done lots of short films and trailers and stuff as well. Yeah. And honestly, it's like, you know, one of the things that Junkie XL really taught me in my time, like helping him out on a few things, was that, you know, he is obviously a genius in whatever context you want to talk about, but he had to literally retrain himself from the ground up.
Yeah, because he was a dance producer, right? Coming out of the Netherlands, like he was making like club tracks and club records, and then he had, like you said, he had to retool himself kind of for Hollywood.
Yeah, he had to start again, basically. Yeah. I mean, he actually he was one of the producers on Sasha's first album, on Air Drawn Dagger, back in the day.
Ah, no way. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just so funny. Like, you know, I ended up working with him and working with Sasha, and it's just so weird. It's like, you probably feel this way about a few people you've worked with. It's like, you listen to their music for years, and then it's like, oh, I'm like DJing with this guy tonight.
Yeah, that's been trippy. I mean, especially with like the deadmau5 stuff. Like, he was like a big part of me, like in that phase between high school and college, and just coming into college, and kind of helped show me just the world of electronic music, and, you know, what was possible. And
no, totally. So obviously you've got the Moog in the studio as well. I mean, in terms of hardware, like, are you mostly in the box with just that sort of sweet piece of Mooginess, or do you have other bits of kit that you rely on?
Yeah, I have 3 synths. I have the Moog Sub 37, and then I also have 2 Dave Smith synths, Prophet 6 and the Prophet Rev 2. And those are, especially the Prophet 6 is a newer addition into my kind of arsenal of gear. But actually, this song, Lotus Eater, that we're going to get into, was written predominantly with the Prophet 6. So I'd say, at least as far as like synths go, I'm completely hardware. I don't really use any VSTs for synth sounds, at least. But I am in the box for most of my processing, and you know, most of my drums are sample based. I do have a Roland TR8, which I use a little bit. I tend to use it more to generate ideas and kind of for jamming than I do for actually kind of producing a track. Like, I think it's kind of rare that the sounds actually transfer over into the final finished product of my songs. But it's an amazing tool, and it's so fast. If I could integrate that into my mixing setup, that would be like the ideal next step.
Yeah, you'd be like the LA version of Kink at that rate.
Well, that guy is on a whole other level. He's
so silly. It's amazing, isn't it?
Because he's syncing everything by ear just instantly, and he's just so fast. Like it's like you're watching him, and like the tape is sped up like 2 times or whatever, because he's just like.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah. So predominantly in the box, apart from those 3 main weapons of the Prophets and the Moog. Yeah. Yeah. So shall we share the screen and have a little look, shall we?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, because we could talk about film scores and stuff all night otherwise. And forget to actually break the track down that we're here to look at, right?
Yeah. But no, I could talk about film scores all day.
Yeah. Same. Like on the Blade Runner 2049 thing, the track that Hans wrote at the end, that final scene at the dam.
Yeah, in the water. Yeah.
It's called Sea
That was
Wall.
my favorite one.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to that, and I was actually saying this to Patrice Baumel on the phone yesterday. Shout out to Patrice. We had an epic phone conversation yesterday, which went on for like 3.5 hours. And we were talking about film scores and stuff, and I was saying, like, if you listen to that track independent of the movie, it still absolutely blows your head off.
Yeah.
Really.
Man, there's one other film score moment I want to briefly touch on. I'm sure you're a fan of like Alex Garland too, and like he did the movie Annihilation, and
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it.
Okay, that was another crazy one to see in theaters. But there's this moment at the end of the film, not to give anything away, but like where this song comes on called "The Alien," And forgive me, I'm forgetting the name of the composer right now. I think it's Ben Salisbury or something like that. But it was some of the most brilliant sound design that I've ever seen in a movie. It was just like this rippling, fluttering sound, like of chords moving and changing. And it was with this really insane, visceral imagery that I don't want to say without giving away part of the film. But it just, hearing that one moment, and it was like 2 hours of buildup where you're not hearing much music or scoring at all, and then out of nowhere this like really just some of the most brilliant sound design I've ever heard just like unfolds. And yeah, it was such a powerful moment. And it's like just little moments like that really stick around with me and really inspire me to like, man, can I like create some kind of moment like that like within a track? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's about being able to integrate that kind of like concept into your own music, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
totally. I'm gonna have to, like, when we finish this tonight, I'm gonna have to run straight into my lounge and watch Annihilation before you spoil it for me.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, Michael will be texting me after the call, going, "This happens in the end. Listen to this bit."
Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
thanks. Yeah, thanks. I haven't even seen it yet. Yeah, well, there you go. So should we have a look at Lotus Eater in Ableton then? Yep.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm gonna open Ableton on my end.
Cool. We are there. Let me just...
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can scroll through the project a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. So live 10 then, yeah?
Also, I can turn on a little cursor icon. That would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? Never mind, it's not here. It disappeared. Yeah, this is Ableton 10. I only recently upgraded about like 2 months ago or something, and I really do love it. Particularly like some of the new devices like Echo and like the drum bus tool, and yeah.
No, they make it worthwhile just for the update alone. Those two. Yeah.
But yeah, this is in general how most of my sessions look. I'm really big on organization, so like some nice color coding, and I think it's so important to be able to locate any sound. It's like you're listening to your track and like you hear something that's a little bit off. You're like, what's causing that? Oh, maybe it's the bass. I can immediately go, oh, these are my bass sounds. I know it's got to be one of those, and I can isolate it. And it makes it really nice too for I do some like bussing at the top, and then it's like when I want to compare the relative volume of certain things, I can like quickly go back to session view and I can see the volumes just like right next to each other. I'm a big fan of like bussing over grouping, but that was also kind of a methodology that I developed before you could like group within groups. But even now I still for the most part like it, but nothing against grouping.
No, I mean, it all roads lead to the same result ultimately, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what the whole thing's about. So in terms of the colouring then, because I'm such a nerd, as you know, and I'm such a stickler for like the organizational stuff. Like I love it. Yeah. So do you use like the same colours every time?
In general, yes. My drums are always this orange color, but like the color scheme of everything else definitely isn't always exactly the same. But in general, I just like grouping similar elements. So it's like the main melodies are going to be the same. All my kind of effects elements I always like to have at the bottom. So the colors maybe change a little bit, but the idea is always the same, to keep similar elements together.
No, amazing. So in terms of starting points for Lotus Eater, like where did the concept kind of arise from, and what was the first initial element that kind of sparked the inspiration?
Yeah, I was playing a good amount of shows at the time, and I was feeling like I didn't have enough original tracks that were kind of more in like the peak time category. So I wanted to write something that I could play in my sets in the middle of the set or towards the end, where I just knew it would work. I knew it would sound big. I knew it could kind of get a good reaction. And, most of my songs don't really come out of that impulse. Usually I'm inspired by like, hey, let me just try and write something cinematic or something emotional or something beautiful. But in this case, I was really like, oh, I want to write something with some good energy to it that's really going to sound big. So it started just by like, oh, let me try and build like a cool groove, something that immediately has some punch, and then I can like write on top of that. So it started just like with a basic groove.
Wow.
And like one of the things I like doing is like putting something on the kick. Sometimes on this one, I think it's on. It's like a noise sound. And it's hitting like opposite the clap. Like normally it'd be on like the 2 and the 4. So just immediately starting to build a groove like that, and trying to build like a sturdy foundation that I could write some melodies and stuff on top of.
Yeah, sure. So it was drums first for you, right? On this kind of thing, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say it's 90% of the time for me, it's like drums first. I think it's just, it's hard for me just to write a melody or chord when there's nothing else. If I at least build like a groove first and I add a couple tonal elements in the groove, then it's like there's context for the melody and for the chords. And I just find it's much easier. Then it's like I'd much rather write to a basic groove than write to a metronome too. So I don't know. It's how I've ended up working and starting most of my tracks.
Yeah, totally. So could you give us a little bit of a level for the drums? Because I'm just going to double check that the Ableton's coming through on the live stream.
Yeah, I'm hearing double right now.
Are you hearing double right now?
Yeah, I'm hearing it from your side too.
Oh, interesting. Okay. The wonders of live television, eh, Michael?
Right, yeah.
The wonders of live television. Okay, so let me just see on our end. Just want to play a loop for us for a sec?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
Oh, now it's good. Now I don't hear double. It sounds good to me now.
Cool. Yeah, I think we've got it now.
Okay.
So you like to kind of keep it nice and sparse to begin with?
Yeah, I try to make it mixable, but still interesting.
Great.
I think one of my favorite things to do too is like I just record a bunch of these little hits out of the Vogue, and then I know I can put them in at any instant just to add a little bit of ear candy. And that's always nice. It's like you fill out your whole arrangement and you make it mixable or whatever, and that's very like utilitarian. But then I also want to have little elements that are just interesting to listen to. So it's not just like you're listening to a 2-minute intro of a kick and a snare and then a hi-hat comes in 1 minute later. It's like you add in these little details that are just like, yeah, just like ear candy.
Yeah, that's like you were saying in that kind of sort of cinematic film score kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps to throw it through like a giant reverb, like a black hole or something.
Nice.
In this case, yeah, it's right here.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. Yeah. The Eventide black hole, probably my favorite reverb plugin ever.
Yeah, same. I would definitely say the same. Obviously, you can't use it on everything because it's gigantic, but especially for like for synth sounds, it's really amazing just to put something like it's in a huge like cinematic space.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. So are they like original kind of compositions that you're doing with Moog? Are they presets that you've kind of tweaked? Is it all from scratch sound design that you do with that?
Yeah, so it's all, at this point, I've probably made like 20 or 30 patches that I've just saved, and I just use those, and I'll tend to find one I like, and then I'll tweak it a bunch more and kind of keep creating it. I think it's nice, too. It's like when you're making sounds for a song, it's like you start to record it off this one patch that you have, and you're like, all right, those are good, I like that. Then you tweak that patch and you keep developing it and make it crazier, and then you record all these sounds built off of that, and maybe you do that like 2 more times. And because it's all originating from that one same patch, it's like immediately they all kind of exist in the same world or the same space. So that's like a common thing I'll do, just to keep building sounds off of one sound.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. No, it's great.
Yeah.
So in terms of, once you've got that sort of drum groove down, is that where you start to get ideas for bass lines and stuff, or is it the main riff that comes after that? Like what was the next stage in the process?
Yeah, in general, it's the bass after that. It's like I got the drums, and then I want to add some like weight underneath. And, in this case, the bass isn't really following a chord progression. It's just a steady note. I think it's just a G. But in general, I'll probably lay down the drums, then I'll write like a melodic bass line, like something that's shifting notes, and that can kind of lead to the chords.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, in this case, because I wanted something that was maybe just a little bit more of a club tool, I guess, I was okay with just having the bass stagnant for the most part and just like, on a single note.
Yeah, so just a nice kind of like plodding, sort of chugging bass to get things going.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's just a couple layers to it. I think they're both from the Prophet. Yeah.
So how do you find the difference between the two Prophets? Do you feel like one gives you a slightly different sound to the other one? And what's the process where you felt like you needed both in the setup?
Well, I got the Rev 2 initially, and I love it, and I still use it a good bit, but it was missing a little bit of the richness and thickness that I wanted out of my polysynth. Mm-hmm. It's amazing from a creative sense. Like the sound design capabilities of it are really quite impressive and useful, but it still wasn't exactly the sound that I was looking for. So I picked up just the Prophet 6 desktop unit, and that proved to be kind of exactly the tonality and character of synth that I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And had that more richness and thickness. For the same reason I love my Sub 37. It's like the signal that you get out of it in general is like very rich. And from there you can do a lot of like subtractive processing to clean it up and stuff. But I like having like a more potent kind of full signal coming out. Mm-hmm. And the Prophet 6 has been great for that.
No, absolutely, yeah.
And when we get to the melody.
Yeah, could you give Ableton just a little bit more level? Just somebody's saying it's a little bit low on the feed. Is that okay?
Let me just put it into a limiter.
Right.
How about that?
That's way better. That's way better. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, sorry, it's a pre-master file, so I had a little bit of headroom. But
well, I'm glad you did. I'd be really concerned if you didn't.
Yeah. Right. Everything's just redlining like crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, oh my God, why did I ask you to do this masterclass? Like.
Yeah. So that those both came from the Prophet, and then actually the melody also came from the Prophet. And if I just play it.
Love how kind of sparse you've been with the main melody. Like I see this with so many people, when they get a great melody like that's very simple, they tend to just completely overdo it, and they completely start to like almost overwhelm everything else in the track with this it's a beautiful melody, but they tend to like overplay their hand a little bit. And I think it's a little bit of a skill to develop of, if I've got something that sounds really great like this, like don't over egg the pudding, don't go too crazy with it.
Yeah, I think about it as like a listener too. It's like if I'm on a dance floor and I'm hearing this track and this really nice melody comes in, and then you don't hear it again for a little bit, it's like you're kind of anticipating the next moment it's going to play, and it's almost like a pleasant surprise when it does, versus if you keep playing and keep playing it. So I think that was a little bit of my mentality here.
Yeah, totally.
But I think also it's like, I wrote a melody and I did a bunch of variations, but not an endless amount. So it's like, I don't want to exhaust you by just constantly playing that same melody or playing it too close together. Like I'd rather kind of use it sparingly over the course of the track and use it like deftly. Yeah,
absolutely, because less is absolutely more, and like you say, it's it gives you almost like an opportunity to kind of miss the melody just for long enough for when it comes back in. It's like it's really satisfying and quite gratifying,
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, excellent.
Basically what I'll do is like once I come up with a melody, I'll just keep jamming out a bunch of variations, and I'll usually do it in session view. So like each of these, there's 64 bars there of that take, and then this one also has 64 bars, but it's completely different kind of modulation, and then same with this one, and same with this one, and same with this one. So it's like I try and give myself as many options and variations as possible. And that way when I move to arrangement, I can pick and choose whatever best take serves that specific moment.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a great way of working, and I love the subtle variations you've put into that main melody where there's like just even like one note difference, but if one of them is like a higher sort of like a peak sort of passing note, it just adds a whole other level of emotion and intensity to it. And you've like we were saying when we did the stream test yesterday, it's that kind of like 80-20 Pareto principle of you've managed to get the most amount of effect out of the least amount of work. Yeah,
exactly. And then another nice thing too is like when it's all printed to audio, I can do little changes on the audio. Like if I show you.
I love that little bend at the end, dude.
That's what I was going to show you. Yeah. It's just like a little bit of transposition, automation, and like just stuff that's really easy to do in audio. And like once I have that all printed, I could do that same bend on any note I wanted. You could obviously do that in MIDI too with a synth, but it's just like so fast in audio.
Yeah, it's crazy. Is it just one semitone's worth of bend on that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy because you would think, like, to the untrained ear or not seeing this, that it would be possibly more than that. And obviously, with the transposition there, it's stepped, isn't it? So,
it's I'm not even missing a curve.
I was going to say, like, you wouldn't be able to get, like, it would sound stepped otherwise. But
yeah,
it's crazy that you've managed to get that in such a simple way.
Well, it's like a nice variation too, because I can have the melody playing normally, and then the one time you hear it with the bend, it like immediately perks up your ear. It's like, ooh, that's different. It's a little detuned. It's like a little off, but it's nice. It's like it kind of wakes you up to the melody again.
One thing I'm really noticing about your whole approach, and something that I find really, really impressive, is just how kind of like, and this kind of speaks to you, if you don't mind me saying, as a person as well. It's like, you're very calm.
Yeah, for sure.
And you almost have like a kind of I don't mean this in a bad way. Like it's like there's like a level of like really healthy like detachment in a way where you're almost able to take a little bit of a step back and be able to just make the right move at the right time.
Yeah, well, I think you have to have that when you're making art. It's like if you get too attached to it, then like you'll never finish it. You'll never send it out. You'll never say it's done. And you'll be afraid to make like the changes you have to make. Like sometimes I'll write like this really cool bridge for a song. I'm like, oh, this is such a different moment. It's cool. It like shows off some more of my sound design abilities, but in a different way. I really want to fit it in, and like I'll force it in, and then I'll just listen back and I'll be like, yeah, it's cool, but like that's not right for the song. Like it's awesome that I made that, and it would be so cool if it made sense in the track, but it doesn't. So I just have to kind of like be okay with putting that away and not using that. And you got to do what's going to serve the song the best,
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. That really is the key aspect, isn't it? And as I say, like, I see this a lot, and I have to deal with it myself because, I'm maybe a little bit more of an excitable type of person. And it's hard sometimes to kind of like, you obviously want to have a good time while you're writing the track, but you've also got to be calm enough to be able to make the right decisions at the right time.
Yeah, well, I think there's the time for the frenetic, crazy energy, and I think that's when you're starting a song and you're getting the ideas out. It's like, let me just like vomit out as many different ideas as possible and
Such a
write
great
them
way
in
of putting it.
yeah, and you're in like a kind of a frenzy state because you're like, I'm just throwing everything against the wall. I'm not sure what I'm going to use later. And that's the time when you want that passioned kind of high emotional state, is when you're just channeling and getting things out. And then when it comes time to like arrange and comes time to mix, that's where you really need like a level head and like a calm head, you know. And that's when like you got to really make the best decisions, and you're thinking about the track as a whole and where it's going to go and its purpose. So I think, at least personally, I like to separate those states. I have my like manic, frenetic compositional phase where, yeah, it's just like idea vomit or throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And then I have like the very measured, calm, let me approach this like a scientist and get the mix down right and get the arrangement right. And yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And again, that main riff is such a great testament to just how kind of organized you are, so you can actually exploit and take advantage of all of these great ideas.
Yeah, and you can actually see like each different color is like coming from a different clip, and like it's a little bit different. And then I'll even go as far as like I'll layer it with another version. This one's like a higher octave.
And is that like an entirely different recording?
Yeah, exactly. And then it's nice because you can like process it differently if you want, and then yeah, it's just like layering it with different recordings and different takes. Another thing I did was I was mentioning earlier, the bass line I wrote for this is mostly just in G. But I was listening to John Hopkins' Open Eye Signal.
Oh.
That's kind of what inspired the bass from this.
Right.
It's an amazing track, and it's got that pulsing like quarter note bass, and he has it where he lifts it up every now and then. I think it goes up to like a, I don't know, minor third or a major third or something. But I wanted kind of a similar moment like that, where like the bass has been going steady in this one note, and then all of a sudden, you lift it up a few semitones, and it like brings up the track and adds a little tension for a second, and it's like so satisfying to bring it back down. So like I did a similar thing. If I just I'll just play from here.
That's really cool, because you don't expect it, right? And then when it happens, It's like, oh.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. And like I don't do it at all in like the first half of the track. It happens briefly in the build up. But yeah, it's like this nice shift in energy that, like you said, you weren't expecting. And I love it in Open Eye Signal because he just like holds it on that third for like much longer than you think. And you're like, oh my God, it's still there. It's still there. It's still there. And it's so satisfying when it comes back down.
Yeah, and it's so tense as well when he does it there. And it's almost like, you're clenching your teeth, and you're almost like, by the time he drops it back down, you're almost like, thank God for that.
Exactly. So I love that, and I just wanted to channel like a little bit of that. I was like, it'd be so simple. I could just, record another one in A sharp versus my G, and then, it worked out harmonically. So yeah.
No, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. It really is. And it's great, again, just to hear you talk so openly about like influences as well, and where you got ideas from. And, I do think there's a little bit of like, I don't know how to put it any other way other than like, I think there's a little bit of creative fascism going on in a lot of like electronic music production.
Sure.
Where it's like, you're supposed to come up with absolutely everything yourself. And it's an impossible thing to do, because, of course, you're going to just have ideas based on the tracks that you love and based on your influences, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, nothing is created in a vacuum. There's nothing that is literally purely original. I think that's impossible. It's like everything comes from something. And most of our really good, interesting ideas are just a synthesis of 2, 3, 4 of our favorite things, and we're presenting them in a way and through our lens that is unique because it's coming from us, but it's still a synthesis of other things. So like, yeah, maybe this track has a little bit of open eye signal, maybe it has some film score influence that I like, and maybe it has I don't know, some kind of peak time more techno thing that I like too, and then you combine all those things and then it makes this track. And it's original in the sense that it's never existed before. If I hadn't made this song, you know, it would never be here. And yeah.
But I think what's really important to point out at this juncture talking about this is that both of the influences that you've talked about are not technically dance floor house and techno records. They've come from somewhere completely different, and you know, this is not a criticism of anyone, but I think maybe one of the slight issues we've had in recent years in dance music production is that it feels like everyone's kind of listening to the same tracks, or people are making house and techno records based on the influence of other house and techno records, rather than thinking about taking the influences from other genres and then integrating it into a dance floor aesthetic, which is one of the building blocks that the house and techno is built on.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm definitely just as guilty of that. It's like you hear some amazing record on a label that you love, and you're like, oh my God, I want to channel that exact thing. And because it's so exciting and you're hearing these new sounds. And I definitely find myself doing that every now and then too. But I think to your point, the tracks of mine that I'm the most excited about, that I end up finishing, are the ones that I'm pulling in different influences, or I'm taking a different approach, or it's something that I'm personally also excited about, not just because it's already out there, but because, oh, this is so me. Like, this is pulling from the exact things that only I like. Like, maybe there's a certain 5 amount of artists that only you love, or it's your combination of these films that you love and these books that you love, and that's what makes your sound unique. But it's like, when you are pulling in those things, you can feel that, oh, this is something that's like very personal to me, and it's really channeling my identity. And those are definitely the tracks that are easier to finish, and that I think that end up getting signed as well.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And you know, for me, it's like, and this kind of plays into the obviously the album that I worked on with Sasha as well, was, you know, my sort of sensibility is that I want to be able to pull all the drums and all of the dance floor stuff out of my records that I release that are dance floor records, but you'd be able to take all the drums away and it would still work as an individual piece of music no matter what. That's kind of what I aim for, and that was what was really gratifying about working on the Sasha album, was that we kind of did that. Like, we didn't really have any form of proper dance floor records in there at all. You know, it wasn't really meant for that. And even there, you know, one of the things that we worked on with John Graham, with Quiver, who did the vocals on one of the tracks, we were vacillating for ages about whether or not, do we put a kick drum underneath this or what? And then we ended up going, nah, don't do it. Don't do it. It's cool.
I love that record. There's like a moment even in one song where like a kick and a hat do come in, but it's for like 15 seconds, and like they kind of like get filtered in and they quickly get filtered out. It's just to show you like, oh, there could be drums beneath this and it would work great, but no, we don't need them.
We're gonna give you a break from all of that stuff, right? And John's really interesting as well, because like Quivers as an artist, like a lot of his influences are not even electronic. Like a lot of them are like rock, and you know, like bands like Pink Floyd and other, you know, really interesting kind of like prog rock bands. And he's always looking to try and integrate influences from those types of genres into his music.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like, if we're pulling our influences just specifically, let's say, from techno or from house, it's like kind of a narrow thing. It's like it's all in the same structure as the music we're creating. It's like there's only so much you can do within the confines of these genres. But if you pull your influences from anything, from as wide as films or other art forms, or even just rock or pop music, then like you can come across these like really crazy ideas that like you would never have thought to try in your music, just because it's not in the wheelhouse or even the language of house and techno. So I think that's why, like, I'll get a lot of inspiration even just from like like reading a book or something where I'm reading this 1,000 page Neil Stephenson science fiction book, and like there's like 3 books in one. So I'm like, dang, what if I put kind of 3 tracks in one and had like these 3 distinct sections that still all work together, and it becomes this like epic 8 or 9 minute thing, stuff like that I wouldn't necessarily think of if I was just studying like, oh, like what's really killing it on Beatport right now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, that's kind of the point that I'm making, which is as much as that's like a really admirable intention and it can lead to good results, it makes things oddly kind of like self-referencing, and it kind of homogenizes things a little bit. Whereas if people, if we break out of our cycles a little bit and, get our heads out of our, little kind of loops, so to speak, and try and invite in other influences, like it's often the most rewarding parts of it. I mean, it was the same for me last year when I released my EP on Bedrock, and a lot of the principles behind, or a lot of the ideas behind that record was due to a book that I was reading about how to induce psychedelic states of mind through dance music and these kind of like visual hallucinogenic states, and that was kind of like my attempt at sort of like expressing those ideas. One of my favorite authors is Julia Cameron, and she wrote like The Artist's Way, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's like the kind of creativity course that you can give yourself. But she talks about it like we all have like a well of creative energy, and like when you write a track or you write an EP, you're using up that well, and when you go to write the next thing, oftentimes you find that, oh, now the well is kind of empty, I've spent it all. And you've got to do things like you've got to go absorb amazing art, or you've got to go on a hike, and you've got to go outside, or you've got to connect with people, or you've got to do these things that help refill the well, so that when you come back to the studio and when it's time to create again, you've refilled it and there's more to pull from. Because otherwise, I think that's when we start trying to emulate something that like the Beatport #1 track or something. I often find that, that's not a strong enough source. It's not like our well is not full. So instead we're looking for these sources of inspiration, and we're pulling these sources that are maybe not the most fulfilling or the most powerful for us, and that it gets harder to finish music at that point too. I mean, it's a miracle then at that rate that anyone's finishing any great music during this lockdown, considering the fact all we're doing is staying in the studio and then going home.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely hard, and I'm sure many people out there creating have experienced that like it's, maybe some people say it's easier to create right now, but I think it is a little bit harder. Like obviously we have a lot of emotions to draw on, but we don't have as many experiences because most of us have been sitting inside. So it's like normally you're drawing some experience from that beautiful hike you went on, or that trip you went on, or that vacation, or seeing your family, or whatever it may be. But I think it is a little bit harder to create right now because we don't have that.
No, totally. But yeah, I mean, it's such a great points that you raised there. And, actually, I'm going to look at the Julia Cameron stuff because it's a great reminder, actually, that I haven't actually dug into that. I'm a big fan of Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course, man. Of course. Yeah. We could do a whole podcast about that book.
maybe we should. Yeah. Maybe we should give it a few weeks and then just do that,
Honestly, I've given that book to more people than any other book. It's just like, it had such a profound effect on me, and I can't speak highly enough about it.
Yeah, and I'd say what's really interesting is that it had a profound effect on me the first time I read it, but I read it again recently, and it ruined me. I was literally sat in the coffee shop like crying, reading it, because it hit me on a whole other level.
Wow.
Like, it really hit me on like a really, really deep level, and I think I was maybe more ready to receive like the deeper teachings of it the second time around. Like, it really, really got me,
Well, it is so interesting to read it at different points in your life. It's like for those who haven't read it, it's like the idea of resistance, and there's this like kind of a universal force out there that's trying to prevent us from doing our work, and it's our job to like overcome that resistance. And the second part of the book, like turning pro, like I remember the first time I read The War of Art, I read that section and I'm like, oh my God, I'm an amateur. I'm like, I'm not taking this seriously. I'm a dilettante or whatever. I'm like just flirting with this idea, like I haven't fully committed. And then the second time I read it, maybe 3 years later or something, I was like reading the turning pro section, and I was reading all the habits and how you structure your day around your art and creating. I was like, I'm doing all the things now. Like, oh shit, like I turned pro. Like somewhere along that line, those 3 years from when I first read it, I made that transition, and like now I'm operating from like a pro mind state. So it's been so cool to like revisit it and kind of reflect on my own path and my own creativity.
Yeah, that's why we're called Make Your Transition, dude, because that's what we're trying to help people to do, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I like the way you slipped it in there, maybe unknowingly, but you definitely did.
Yeah. Oh, no, that was completely accidental, but yeah, you're right.
No, it's totally cool. So yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at back to the session here. I mean, I'm seeing some lovely usual suspects that I see a lot of, and I see you're a big fan of sound toys.
Oh yeah, you know, for the longest time I only had Decapitator and I think Crystallizer and maybe Echo Boy, and probably even when I made this project I only had those. But now I have their whole, I think it's all of them. I got their complete package or whatever. Oh, where are the rest of them? For some reason they're not all showing up right now.
That's okay.
Oh, that's right. There we go. Yeah, but man, I can't say enough about their plugins. I love them, but for the most part I really use Decapitator on almost every sound, and I just really love adding a bit of drive to things, and then I'll steadily bring up the low cut the more drive I add, and you can really like pump out some nice mid-range in a sound. And you know, I'll use it on drums, I'll use it on bass, I'll use it on my synths. So just, it's such a powerful tool. A couple other ones like CQ is a nice analog EQ emulator. I particularly like it for the high end. You can see I'm adding 9 dB of high end actually here. Wow, and 6 dB. Wow, I'm actually using the crap out of this on this clap. Yeah, that's a really nice one. I don't know if I used any Echo Boy on this session, but that's the other big one. And then Crystallizer has become like a really important part of my sound. I think it's, let's see, nope, not there. Oh, I am using it on a return, so I'm guessing
there you go.
One of these has gone through.
Yeah,
I don't know.
D, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but very often, like, you know, I'll set up a return with it, and then I'll just send, like, let's just send this sound through it.
Yeah, and you get that lovely, like, sort of granular wash, right?
Exactly. And then, I mean, I even added a delay just to kind of extend the tail on the Crystallizer. You could also turn up the recycle. But I just find Crystallizer is nice for adding a bit of randomness into your sounds. It's like when you want to just give something some crazy tail, or, you know, some of the presets on it, it's like doing some granulation, and it raises it up an octave and then another octave, and just you get some wild sound design possibilities, and it's really powerful.
No, it really is. I mean, that's actually the first Sound Toys plugin that I kind of came across a long time ago, and I have to kind of really discipline myself with it, because otherwise it'll just end up on every record and it becomes like a really like recognizable thing. And, you know, like you say, the pitching element of it in particular is what gives it such amazing texture.
Yeah, exactly. One of the tracks I did on Parquet was called Expansion with my buddy Evan Casey. And like the whole lead, the whole main drop section was really done with Crystallizer and using those weird octave granulated tails, and just running a lead through like a return track with it. And it's like you get a duplicate copy of the sound an octave up in some weird granulated fashion. Yeah.
I always like be able to, because sometimes I find like the pitched up granular bits maybe a little dry. So what I'll actually do is I'll do a Crystallizer on a send, but then I'll send that return to another return track, if you get what I mean, with a reverb on, and then you get the extra kind of like expansion. So like I'll be doing crazy stuff, like run a Crystallizer in like through a black hole.
Yeah, you know? That's actually exactly what I do. I love that sound. Just to show people what we're talking about too, I just put Crystallizer on the melody. I just went to one of these other presets, accordion.
So cool. Listen to that. It's ridiculous how good that is.
and it's just from a sound design standpoint, it's like instantly you get something out of this world, and just like something. If I was to try and create that without Crystallizer, like I don't even know how I would do it. I'd have to like duplicate the sound, raise it up an octave, do it again, and then make it so those are happening in a sequence. And it's a pretty mind-boggling.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, as I say, like I've taken that to some pretty big extremes myself. Where even taking that, resampling it, repitching it again, sending it through again, and you know, if I don't discipline myself, like I never finish anything, and it just becomes like a sound design clusterfuck, basically.
Yeah.
So I mean, the Soundtoy stuff is amazing, and you use the a lot of FabFilter. Is that like your main go-to EQ? Is it for FabFilter Pro Q or?
Yeah. I think this is when I had 2. Now I have 3, and it's definitely my go-to EQ. I mean, I can't really speak on it from a sonic perspective. Like maybe it sounds better than EQ8. I personally don't hear a difference, but I think just from an ease of use, it's just it makes EQing fun, which is like EQing can be such like a dry, precise kind of thing. It's like, I'm going to isolate this very specific frequency, and I'm going to try and find it, and then. But I don't know, something about the interface of it, it makes me want to EQ sounds.
No,
it's like
it's so intuitive, and the full screen mode as well is great. You know, especially if you work on larger screens, like I am on the on the 27-inch iMac, is just great. And what I've actually found very, very useful indeed as well, especially on bass, is you can overlay the piano roll on the bottom.
And, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can overlay a piano roll on the bottom. I think it might be in the settings. And what you can actually do is...
And that way you can see like the frequency?
You can set the EQ band to the exact note. So say, for example, if you have like a bass note, like there's always one of those notes that kind of like booms quite a bit. And there's another one that kind of disappears a little. You can really, I'm not sure where it's because I've not used Pro Q3 much actually, so I don't know where the setting is, but it's absolutely brilliant what you can do. You can lock it into this like frame of the actual piano roll, and it will work in like the octaves and stuff as well. It's super powerful.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really great for bass EQing in particular.
Even I use it a lot for like mid-side EQ. I think it's also wonderful for that.
So what's your approach to mid-side then? Sorry, mate, sorry to cut across you. What's your approach to mid-side? Like, what are your what's the thought process with the mid-side EQ? What are you trying to do there?
Yeah, well, so in general, it's like obviously I like to have my like low-end elements a bit more centered. You can even see like if I go to this bass, let's see if I did any. Maybe not here, but in general, like I'll shave off, like let's say it's a bass sound. I was looking at the wrong one. I'll generally shave off around like 150 hertz on the side. Or now that I'm on, Ableton 10, they have this really handy function in utility.
I know what
where
you're
I can
doing.
do bass mono. I can set that. I'll generally set that to like 150 or 160, and that's just making it so like none of the sub frequencies are going to be operating in the side space, which can lead to weird phasing issues or can sound weird on like a big system. So that's a common one I'll do. Also, if I want to just add some stereo image to a sound, it's really nice just to take like a mid-side EQ and like let's just take this for instance. I'm going to change this to side, and now I can just give it a nice bump at like if we play it. So very often, like if I want to widen a sound, I'll just do a little side EQ boost. Typically between like 1 and like 4 or 5K, and it just like gives it a little bit more life on the side on the stereo. So that's a common one. Also very commonly, usually in my master, sometimes on the mix too. Maybe I'm doing it here. No, I'm not. But usually like on the, let's say I'm doing a self master, what I'll do is I'll hit my bass mono, I'll put this to like 160, and then I'll roll off the side frequencies, and this is maybe overkill, but it's like I'm already setting that to mono, but if there's anything left over, then I'll also catch it on the side here. Yeah. And I'll just shelve those off.
I normally do that to about 300 myself, actually.
300. Wow.
Yeah, I go really in. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm sure it helps like create some nice contrast in your mix, because like the under 300 will be like so monoed, and then it can open up. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
the
piano roll thing, Adidas just put a really great comment up. Like, cause I mean, I can't believe I missed it, but there's like that little piano button on the bottom left-hand corner there.
Oh, right there.
Yeah. Click. There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude. What? Please continue.
No, I was gonna say is sometimes with some of my bass sounds, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of stereo in them, like particularly around like 200, 300 hertz. It just sometimes for me, if it's like a more mid-range bass or something, maybe it's like something out of the sub 37, which is carrying the low and the sub, but it also has a nice mid-range. Sometimes I like it to be a little bit wide in the middle. It just makes the sound a little bit bigger, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I will do things like in this case, I think because the bass is from the Prophet 6, I didn't do it, but let's say this bass line was from the sub 37, then often I'll have like a chorus at like 20% or something, and it's just giving some like nice detuning and nice stereo, and then I can clean up the low and like make sure it's all good at the end of the chain. But I like adding like some chorus to my bass sounds, especially if they're mono and coming out of the sub 37, just to give them a little bit of stereo image and make it like a little bit of a more three-dimensional sound.
Yeah, it works really, really well.
Yeah.
That's great. That's super cool. And you were saying about, the fact that you favor bussing over grouping. Is that just like, as you said, is it just like a workflow thing that you've gotten into, or do you feel like you get a specific advantage doing it that way?
Well, the thing is, like, I'll do a bus for the entire mix, except for the kick, and that way I can do. Oh, so here's where I did my mid side. So that way I can like take off the side. I can roll it off at like 165 here, and I can do one on the mid, but it's affecting everything except the kick. And that's because like I don't want to touch my kick at all. Like I'm rolling off a little bit of top end, but in general I want that low to be as clean as possible. And I find that if you're doing too much high passing on the kick, like let's say I have this 30 hertz cut here and it's affecting the kick, and then it goes to mastering and it's also getting another 30 hertz cut there, it's like sometimes the kick starts to lose a little bit of its power, and like the signal just you're like processing it like too many times. So one advantage that I like doing with the buses is that I'm essentially grouping every single sound together except the kick and sending it all to the mix, and that's where I can do like my main mix EQ, and that would be really hard to do with grouping. You'd have to, I mean, you could group all your groups into one super group, but it's just so much easier just to make one bus and send it there. And I'll even, in this case, I had a drum mix and a drum bus. I forget what the exact difference is, to be honest, in this case, but I'll send like the drums to this, and then I'll send that to the mix. And usually I'll have like a synth bus as well and a bass bus as well, and I'll route those all to the mix. But that's nice.
Super interesting, really innovative way of going about it.
Yeah, it's a lot more helpful from the mix standpoint, I think. Again, I could group it all, but this is nice because let's say, I'll just show you if I made like a synth bus. And then I'm just going to go ahead and send this to it. Instead of the mix, it's going to go to synth bus. And now let's say this is playing here. And then immediately I can see like, my synths are peaking at -12, my drums are peaking at -7, the entire mix is at whatever, -11. It allows me to like check all my volumes relative to the other ones, like really simply in session view. It feels a little bit closer to having like a mixing console or something. I can like see the overall volumes, and I can make adjustments, versus trying to find the volume here and then having to scroll back or something. Just from an organizational standpoint, it's like so easy just to check my relative volumes.
That's so good, man. So good. And again, I've not seen an approach like this yet, where you have the entire mix apart from the kick. I think that's a very, very intelligent way of going about it, actually.
Well, it's like for our music, the kick is so crucial. It's like having a good kick for one is hard enough, but then like getting the kick to sound good in the mix, and it's like if that's maybe one of the most important elements, or maybe the most important element, we should be doing everything we can to preserve the kick and give it the best chance of sounding as amazing as possible in the final master, right? So, and the nice thing is like when I do a self master, because I've already done this 30 hertz cut on the whole mix except the kick. Now when I go to mastering, it's like I don't need to redo that. So it's like the kick never has to get high passed. Obviously, if you're using a kick sample that has a lot of like low mud or something in 20 hertz, 15 hertz, yeah, you can roll that off. But in general, the kicks I'm using don't. Like they're already pretty nicely EQ'd and compressed. So at that point, I don't want to touch them at all if possible.
So when you do a self-master, is that purely so you can road test things when you're playing sets, or actually have your self-masters been good enough to be released?
Yeah, a mix of both. There's been a few instances when like I sent, well, for one, I always send self-masters to a label when I'm like trying to sign a track. You know, I always want to, have the best chances possible of getting the track signed. And I think having a nicely mastered demo is always going to be more advantageous than just sending someone like an unmastered pre-master or a mix down. So I think for one, that's the main motivation. But then, for two, it's nice to be able to play it out and have it stand up to other tracks. And then three, there's been a few times when like I've sent the track mastered, self-mastered to the label. They've signed it. They've asked for a pre-master, and then they've got it mastered, and it's come back. And I've been like, you know what? Like the master's good, but I actually prefer my self-master here. Could we use my self-master?
Awkward.
No, it's never been awkward. It's like the label wants the artist to be happy, and they want to release the best master as well, or whatever is the artist would prefer. And like as long as your master I think is still in the ballpark, then in my experience it's always been totally fine. It's just but very often like they send it to the mastering engineer and it comes back and I'm like, oh wow, that's much better than I could have gotten it. Like that's great. So it's I've had both experiences for sure.
No, absolutely, I mean, it's great, as I say, just to see such an interesting and different approach. It's very, very cool, especially with the bussing. It's actually making me think twice about how I do things, to be honest.
Oh, awesome! Yeah. It's like there's some initial resistance when you have to get used to bussing, and like you just have to set it up. But like once you learn the signal flow, it's like it's so easy. It's like turning this to in, and you can really easily send any sound to that, and it's just so nice to send a bus to another bus, and then that bus goes to the master, and it's great.
It's interesting because like you can set that up as part of a template if necessary.
Yeah, the only thing is when you're in the recording process of recording sounds, if you have these set to in, you be getting double volume from like your synths or whatever you're recording. So I tend to do it later in the process when I'm done recording. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, man. So so we've seen obviously the main melodies and stuff as well, and the bass. So is there anything in terms of like background stuff, like other kinds of effects, pads, this kind of thing?
The last step of my process, I'm usually just adding like Foley and effects, and you'll see like there's various things. Like here's some thunder that's just like a
just really low in the background.
Yeah, what I've found the more I've done this is like you want to keep your Foley and background and like nature effects like pretty quiet because they really come up in mastering because they're like the quiet sounds that get amplified. So I try and like put them, like when I take them away I really notice, but have them quiet enough where they're not too distracting or taking away from the track. But I love just simple stuff like that. Like that's just it's actually going through Crystallizer and then going through just like a ping pong delay and a black hole, then some aggressive EQs, and it just makes it so like I'm taking this Foley sound that's like a rice shaker and you're sending it through this like a pretty crazy effects chain, and then all of a sudden it becomes like this weird atmospheric kind of naturey wind sound. And literally cool. And literally like I'll have that running through most of the track, and then at a certain point when like I'm like, oh, it's hectic enough, I can't even hear it anymore, I'll just drop it out. But it's really nice, especially for beginnings and outros too, when you just like I was saying at the beginning of this, when you want to kind of put someone in the world of the track, like having some Foley sounds or nature sounds in the background, like instantly puts you in a different headspace than just hearing like a clean kick and a hi-hat, you know? So.
No, totally, yeah. And it's the type of thing that you miss it when it's not in the track, right? It just kind of...
Yeah, exactly.
The atmosphere of the whole thing. I always find like it lacks a little drama. Those types of elements kind of set the tone and set the scene for the record. And like you've done there, like they don't have to be all the way through.
Yeah, exactly.
They're almost like bookends, aren't they, to like either the beginning and a middle section like you've got there, or, you know, when I've done similar in the past, I've done it at the beginning and then right at the end, you know, to kind of reintroduce them as like an outro element.
Yeah, that's what I typically do too, but it's nice to have it in a breakdown too. It's like everything settles back down and then you hear the effects again, and it's like, I find you don't really need it when you're at like the peak moments of the track usually, because you can hardly even hear it. It's when the track is more sparse in the arrangement, like the intro or the outro or the breakdown, where it can really make a big difference. Another thing that I like doing is just adding little noise stabs to my melodies. This is from the Rev 2, I think. And what I'll typically do is just take the MIDI from the melody and then run it through like a noise generator. And you could do this with a synth, or you could do this with Serum or anything, or any soft synth. And you layer that together and
just give you that extra bit of crispiness, right?
Yeah, you get these nice like noise pulses on each hit, and it adds like really nice high end to the sound, and just makes the sound so much bigger just from a frequency standpoint. You're like just, you know, capturing more ground.
Yeah, and it's nice to have that separated as well, because, like, you know, again, this is another situation where I would maybe think about doing it my way, and I would potentially have the main melody with the noise integrated in on another oscillator, if you get what I mean, and make it part of the sound. Whereas splitting that off and separating it, not only it gives you the ability to use it in other parts of the track, it actually gives you more control over the aesthetic of the whole sound, whether you want it with that noise, maybe you don't want it with that noise at certain points. It just gives you so much more control.
Exactly, and then you can process it differently. So like the noise, for instance, I'm running through Soundtoys Pan Man. That's just giving it some nice stereo movement across your headphones.
Very cool.
Which if I was doing that on the main synth, it would be moving the synth too much, and like we'd lose some of the clarity, you know.
And that's almost like a kind of an implied stereo width, isn't it? It's like it's not going to throw this, because obviously, as you know, with most club systems being mono, you can't go that wild on the panning, because it's not going to come across on mono systems. And even if it was stereo, it would maybe be a little bit disconcerting and a little bit kind of jarring for people in a way.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like a really easy trick. Just add some noise on like a separate layer by like running the MIDI of the melody through either a soft synth or an analog synth, and just having it create noise in the same kind of rhythm. And then you can just go crazy with the filter and do different modulation on the noise. And yeah,
it's a great tip. It's a really great tip. So I was want to ask you about your kick drums. Going back to kick drums for a second, are you? I always call the Sebastian Ledger technique, where it's like, do you use the same kick on every record, or is it a different kick every time? Like, what's your thought process?
Yeah, I found that the kick that I choose vastly impacts the kind of track I make. So it's like when I'm going through the kicks, it's typically closer to the beginning of the session. It's like it really dictates the kind of song I make. So typically I don't use the same kick. I'd probably use a different kick for almost every track. But I definitely go through phases where like I love certain kicks, and like I find myself using them a lot. But then, you know, I find a new one in a sample pack or something, or I make a new one, and then that's now my favorite kick. And in general, though, I think it's typically a different kick for every track. And there's like 15 different kicks I use total, but it's genuinely hard to find good kick drums.
Yeah, and you've got a few layers there, right? So you've got like extra kick, top kick, stuff like that. So the kicks, do you find that you kind of adjusting the levels as you go and trying to change the character of the kick as you go through it?
Yeah, I mean, typically I'm doing the kick, and then somewhere later down the line I realized that it needs some more high end, or it needs some more mid range, or something like that, and I'll end up adding these top kicks, which are, in this case, they're like little perk sounds that I've just, aggressively high passed. But if I take it off, but also I'm rolling off a little bit of the top in there. But it's nice for just giving your kick a little bit of a different texture. Like I could layer it with more kicks, and I could just, high pass those kicks. But I like using,
actual like top samples, so to speak.
Yeah, just different types of sounds that are going to add like a different timbre than you might normally find. And then, just a couple extra double kicks for emphasis. Yeah. And even maybe an early one here. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the layout of that because it just makes it a little simpler, right? Rather than having it all in one overall thing, right?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of just like every sound gets its own channel. It's like, yeah, you could do this all on a single drum rack, but it just gets so confusing so quickly. And like, especially when I'm doing all these micro volume changes or processing things differently, it's like I would much rather just have a different channel for everything.
Yeah, and I'm finding you, because I work in a number of different DAWs as well. Like I work in Logic and Cubase now, and a few others. I'm finding like the approaches of different DAWs are starting to have like an influence on me. Like it's really interesting. Like the Logic 10.5 update has kind of maybe pushed me more towards, because I would do everything in one drum rack, but the problem is that when you want to like export stems, it's like you can't get separate outputs of those drum rack channels. It's a really annoying thing.
Yep.
But for me, it's like you wouldn't have such a problem in this kind of way. And it's interesting because like Logic's version of the drum rack has like completely solved that now. You can put individual MIDI on the individual drum sounds, and it's like, oh, that's actually the way it could be done, So it's it's interesting. It's very, very cool. But it's as I say, to have that separation, it just it makes things so much more visual and so much more clear, right?
Yep, exactly. And even just from a compositional standpoint, it's like it's really nice for drum rack. Like I'll throw in all these different hats that maybe I'll want to use, and I can immediately just like have them be going to the groove, and I can cycle through different ones. And then the nice thing about drum rack is like let's say this is the one I've isolated that I want to use. What I'll typically do is I'll duplicate it a couple times and then just make these little changes to it. So these are 2 duplicates, and you can see over here the envelope is slightly different on each one. And then maybe I've detuned this one a little bit, and that one's not detuned. That one's detuned up, and that way I have now basically 3 instances of the hat, even though it's the same hat. And it's just like a simple way to add variation to the sample.
Yeah, and it's small, but it's enough to kind of like give it that variation. Very similar to kind of like a round robin kind of effect that you get on like stringed instruments and stuff when you're doing more sort of film score type stuff. It just introduces that element of randomness in a way that it's just not, you're not, I always say, you're not firing hi-hats at people with an AK-47, the machine gun hi-hat thing,
Yeah, well, especially like with this is like the main hat in the track. It's like if we're going to be hearing this for whatever 5 minutes of the track, like just adding little small variations is going to really add up over those 5 minutes. Like it's just going to, it's like the more of these small incremental variations you make, they just keep adding a little bit more complexity and nuance and interest to your overall track. And it's just, the more you can get away from things sounding like an exact loop or an exact duplicate, the better.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm always fascinated by like they're the things that really fascinate me, like the smallest things, like that just add the smallest amount of variation, but they're often the things that, like you say, if you compound them over a 5, 6, 7 minute record and over 10, 15, 20 tracks, they tend to add up to something.
Yeah. I mean, it's even as simple as like changing modulation over time, or I do a lot of just long like automation lanes and
I like the fact that you use those sort of split chains as well. That's really, really useful.
Oh yeah, these the different like automation lanes.
Yeah, where it's like it's like the chains in the audio effect rack where you can get the dry and the wet at the same time.
Yeah, I really love that because you could do that on like a return too. But sometimes I just want to do it specifically on this one sound, and it's nice because like you can essentially add like a whole new layer of a track or of a specific sound, and like then I can like tell it when I want it to come in, you know, like this is like a noise layer I created for the bass.
Yeah, a lot of people sleep on the vocoder as a really great white noise generator as well.
Yeah, I'm probably the opposite. I probably abuse it and overuse it.
Well, at least you're honest about it, right?
It's so handy. Like you can see here, I'm using it as like a white noise build on the channel itself versus, you know, I could be doing that with like a sweep or something, but it's kind of nice when you're doing it from the sound itself because it has the pulse of the bass and it's almost like it's coming out of the bass rather than if I was to just do some other sweep, it wouldn't be as like tied in rhythmically. So you know, I'll go as far as I'll add the vocoder, then I add some effects to it, and maybe I even sidechained it. I sidechained it to the kick. And then that's just like the audio effects rack, and it's just like one effect within all the effects on it. So I go crazy with the audio effect racks.
No, definitely. Yeah, it's something, again, I'm a bit of a send and return monster myself, but on occasion when you need an effect like that, when it makes sense, it just makes things so much more efficient, and it's something that you don't get elsewhere, you know, in terms of the way you can split that signal route, and it's a real bonus of being an Ableton user. Yeah.
I mean, the returns are great too. I think this is usually I probably have twice as many as these, and I'll go pretty crazy, which is doing some final processing or using them for effects. Like maybe I'll have like 5 different delay ones and like 3 reverbs and yeah, the send and returns are great in Ableton.
No, absolutely. So we've got a couple of comments here. One person's asking about the Drama S73 plugin and what that's all about and how that works.
Yeah, that was actually a recent addition to my studio. I'm trying to find where I put it. I think it's on the bass, or maybe it's on the melody.
There it is, yeah.
There it is. Yeah. This thing's amazing. It's from Softtube. Actually, my friend Enamor turned me on to it. But yeah, it's typically used in mastering, and you can use it maybe for the same reasons you might use like a vintage warmer to bring out just some more kind of analog warmth. And particularly, I think it's great for bringing out some mid-range. But I really like to use it on just like specific sounds too that I'm looking just to bring a little bit more life out of. So like with this melody, let's see how it sounds with it. I'll go and turn it off.
It's a subtle difference, isn't it? But there's just that much more presence, isn't there, when you run it through the drama?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's good for. It's not going to be like Decapitator where you're really going to radically change something by overdriving it. I think this is really a great tool when you just want to add like a little bit more mid-range, a little bit more high-end, or a little bit more presence to a sound. So it's great. I recently just got a bunch of Softtube stuff, and this is one of my favorites for sure.
Such a fan of the Softtube stuff.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, I don't use it so much nowadays, but back in the day I've been using it like a whole heap. Their Tube Tech plugin was great, and just you could go on all day with how good they were, you know? Phenomenal. But
so this is actually a tool that I'll use in my masters now too. Like I was using Vintage Warmer before, but sometimes I found that Vintage Warmer kind of muddies your bass a little bit, or if you drive it a little too hard, sometimes your kick starts to clip. So I've been using the Drummer instead, and I've basically been achieving the same amount of like perceived loudness, but without distorting or clipping my low end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the Vintage Warmer if you want that kind of fuzz. But it is very heavy-handed.
Yeah. I wouldn't per se use it if I was gonna like put the track out and that was going to be the final master. But like when I'm trying to road test something and or I'm sending it to a label and I want to have it be at a competitive volume, Vintage Warmer is great for that, for just pushing out like a couple more dB of perceived loudness.
Absolutely. So somebody else is asking about the newfangled plugin you were using on the stereo out. Is that for yourself, Master? Is that the limiter?
Yeah. So I use it dual purpose. When I'm using it in a mixdown, it's typically for the transient shaper. Yeah, in this case, you can see it's got this really amazing multi-band transient shaper. I'll run it on my drums. Sometimes if I have a kick that's a little too weak, I can run it on the kick. It might be a subtle difference right now if you're hearing it, but again, I think that's kind of what we're going for with most of these tools, is like just little subtle improvements that add up. But yeah, it's an amazing limiter. It's actually also my main mastering limiter. Yeah. So when I'm doing my mastering, this is always at the end of my chain. I've found that compared to other limiters, I can drive it a bit more and without hearing any clipping or without hearing any audible like gain reduction. Something about its algorithm is like really good at adapting on the fly to small incremental volume changes, and man, it's just super powerful. Yeah,
it's my main limiter for mastering as well, both when I do my own masters and when I master for other people, and it's actually it has an element of AI to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I love being able to go into where you've got the limiter EQ there, and just being able to balance the bands a little bit and decide per band how much limiting each bit gets or each frequency band gets. I mean, I've been able to squeeze minimum an extra 3 dB of perceived loudness out of my masters using that, because it's not like every frequency band gets the same treatment like it would do with like a single band limiter, like a Pro L, which is a fantastic limiter, or an L2 that you used to sort of boost the volume in Ableton before. It's such a wonderful limiter. I'm such a fan of it.
I agree. Yeah, it's so smart. There's some kind of AI or like very responsive elements of it. But even the transient shaper, I love the multi-band aspect as well. It's like sometimes I really want to focus the transients just on the mid-range or just on the high end, so I can easily do that. And I love throwing it on particularly my drum buses, and then always on my master.
No, it's brilliant. It's really, really cool. This question's coming in now, and this Robin Kirkup, he's just asked, do you ever work on a project and hear it so much that you end up changing it over and over again? I have this recurring cycle that just sends me nuts.
Yeah, definitely. I think at a certain point, you have to realize that, like, what I'm doing is not improving the track. It's actually making it worse. And in those cases, that's when it's time to walk away and work on another track or something. There's been many cases too where like I finish a track and I'm like, this is good, but I don't know if it was the best arrangement that I could have done. And so sometimes I'll sit on it for 3 weeks, then I'll revisit it with fresh ears, and I'll literally do a new arrangement. And it hasn't always worked, but sometimes the new thing that comes out is a lot better. But I think in general, I guess what I'm trying to say is when that happens, just take a step back and work on something else. Like that's totally normal.
No, absolutely, yeah. And for me, it's like I've been in that loop and then got tracks to the finish line, and then honestly, I've got finished tracks there that I've just walked away from, and I'm like, nah, I'm not putting that out. I mean, I think one thing a lot of artists might be wise to think about is not everything that you finish needs to be released.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, obviously we want to put everything out because we finished it and we made it and we're proud of it. But I think in general, I like to like finish something and then wait a few weeks and then reevaluate how I feel about it, because like you're in a dangerous position when you first finish the track because you're infatuated with it. You're like, oh my God, I actually finished something. And that alone is such a powerful feeling that like you think the track is the best thing in the world, and then you immediately want to send it to 20 people. But then, oftentimes I find like 2 weeks later, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's like, it wasn't as good as I thought it was in the 30 seconds after I finished it. So I think it's always helpful, like give yourself a little bit of distance from the track and get some objectivity and then reassess.
No, absolutely, yeah. And it's funny for me because like there's been a funny situation come up in the last few weeks as I've been using one of those tracks that we're talking about that I've been like finished and sat there. I've been using it as an introduction for the live streams. Yeah. And honestly, I'd like completely thought, I'll just use this because it's not going to get pinged on like YouTube or anything, even though it's one of my records. And like literally now, like 3 years after I finished it, like I keep getting like emails off people and comments going, "What is that track? It's amazing! Like, where can I get it?" That's great. It's like, oh shit! Like maybe I need to actually put this out now. Do you know what I mean? And I'd convinced myself it was like awful that I'm not putting that out. It's terrible. It'll do for an intro and that's about it. So maybe again, these things can sit there for a long time and you know, have a different life in some cases, you know.
Yeah, literally the other song I'm working on right now, it's like a, you know, I found this like Tom Waits sample that I really liked literally 4 years ago, and I never finished it, and I revisited it like this week, and like I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty good idea, and like I've rebuilt it from scratch. But it was crazy to me, like, oh my god, I had this idea 4 years ago, and like now I'm returning to it with like new skills and a new mindset, and now it's like infinitely better because I'm a better producer now. But the idea was still there, and it's just crazy that like we can take ideas that are that old and kind of reinterpret them. And yeah,
on an extreme level, I always love the Eric Prydz story about piano.
No, I haven't heard it.
Oh, dude, maybe he finished it like 4 years before it went big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he played it. Yes, I go.
No, I thought I heard that like he finished it and like sent it to some people or wasn't that stoked on it or something, and then he played it one time and it got like an insane reaction.
Yeah. From what I heard from an interview with him, he said he'd played at a festival and the crowd just didn't do anything, and they were just like, And then he played it again 4 years later and like brought the house down, and he's like, maybe I need to put this out, and it's piano.
That's good.
You know,
that's crazy.
And what he was saying was like, it's sometimes people just aren't ready.
Yeah.
Or the track is not ready for where the scene is or what people are into or whatever.
Yeah, it's hard to base things off just one specific moment too. It's like you play it in the middle of a set or at a club, and for whatever reason that particular point of the night or that party you played, the crowd just doesn't like it. But it doesn't mean that track doesn't have value or it isn't good, you know. It's like how much of that is just like chance or whatever, and you just happen to play it for the wrong room.
No, exactly. Yeah. And Adidas just put a comment on here saying, and he finished Opus in 30 minutes, as if I need to feel any worse about
Yeah.
So, oh god, man, that guy's so silly. Like, ridiculous how talented that guy is.
Yeah. Especially too, I heard he works like almost exclusively in the box, at least for like his synthesis. It's all just like Logic's built-in synths, which that's pretty mind-blowing.
The only synth that I know that he has hardware-wise is a monopoly.
Oh, okay.
That's the only one that's the only piece of hardware he has apparently.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Everything else is completely in the box, and it blows my mind that you can get sounds like that, and it's all just like internal to Logic or certain third-party synths, you know.
Yeah.
And I know it's funny saying that as being someone who owns an education platform, but I kind of like the fact that he's never really talked about his process because it kind of makes it a little bit sexier.
True. Yeah. Everyone's like, what's he using? How does he do it? Like, yeah.
I've spent years trying to work it out, and he's just like, never going to tell you.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's just the definition of like the 10,000 hours. Like he's probably put in 40,000 hours into producing music, and he's just a master.
Well, all that time, you know, not flying, driving, and being on boats and stuff. You know, what else is he gonna do, right?
Yeah.
Hilarious. So Charlie's got a question here. Charlie Jesse, how do you approach building a live set? Do you add in new tracks you've recently heard? Somebody says a live set, I think maybe like it's like a DJ set. Or what do you think when ordering your sets? Do you have like what do you do in terms of playlists, or you know, do you kind of go on the fly a little bit, or are you a little bit more pre-prepared? What's the idea?
Yeah, it all depends on the gig. Like, let's say I'm playing a 1 hour festival set and it's like a pretty big one. In those cases, I do a lot of prep. I want to know the records that I'm going to play, mainly because I only have an hour and like I want to make sure I really smash it in that amount of time. And like, it's a big stage and I want to be on my game. So in those instances, very often I'll like program 80-90% of the set and then make adjustments on the fly if something doesn't work or if I have a good idea in the moment. But then the polar opposite of that is, let's say I'm playing just like a club show and I get to play for 3 or 4 hours. In those instances, I won't prepare any type of set list or track list. I'll just come in with like, maybe I'll build some folders beforehand. Like, these are 400 tracks that I'm going to pull from and that I might want to play, and I can pull from those. And then also on my USB, I have it broken down by like a genre and BPM. So I know if it's earlier in the night, I'm in 120 to 123 range. I can pull from there. If it's peak time and I'm playing maybe even up at like 130 or something or faster, I have dedicated folders for that. So it's on the fly in those instances, but there's like a big organizational structure built into my USBs where I can really quickly find the folders that might have the tracks that I would want to be playing in that moment.
No, exactly. It makes me yearn for the days when I could just throw a load of vinyls in a bag and go to the club and get on with it.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me because like you had to do so much pre-selection in that moment, like because you're physically restricted by how much you can carry. So you're doing so much thought process beforehand. You're like, I'm going to show up to the gig. I'm guessing that these 40 records are going to be the right records to play, but you kind of have to just like do a lot of almost like imagining and thinking about the venue and like what the crowd's going to be like before you even get there. In that case,
no, it is. It's definitely that, and the thought process is completely different because it was all based on like visual reference more than anything. And it was like, and you'd just go through your bag and it was like your gut feeling would come through at that point. And it's like, oh, there's that thing with the green label. Oh, that like old Derek Carter thing. Oh, brilliant, I'll throw that on. And it was just, it's very, and you can still do that digitally for sure, depending upon how you organize it. But it was just so off the cuff and so on the fly back then. Yeah, and you can definitely see I still see a difference when, like one of my favorite DJs is Sven Vath.
Oh yeah, of course.
For that, because he just rocks up with a bag full of vinyl and cracks on like nothing's changed. Do you know what I mean? But it's all the better for that. You know what I mean? And I think he definitely keeps that kind of vibe alive, so to speak. But again, depending upon I mean, me personally, I kind of, because of the fact that I'm an old vinyl guy, I kind of like my playlisting is just very, very loose. It really is. Like I just throw a load of records in that I love that kind of cover as many bases as possible, and I just try and let my kind of gut instinct in the moment take over, really.
Yeah, I feel like it's a mix of you want to be prepared, but you also want to be able to adjust on the fly at any moment. Like if what you're playing isn't working, you got to be able to adapt, and maybe you should be playing a little bit faster than you were playing, or maybe you've come out of the gates way too hard. And I think having a system in place where you can really quickly identify your next tracks and that allows you to adapt on the fly, like that's so key.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of big artists do this in recent years, actually, where it's like they turn up and it's like, this is my set. Yeah. And I'm going to play it record for record, whether you like it or not. And it's like, okay, this, and it gets a bit weird because you can almost feel like they've lost the crowd, but the crowd's kind of still there because they're who they are. And it just gets a bit strange for me, rather than, I don't know, I mean, because my school of like learning how to DJ was like, Lee Burridge, Sasha, John Digweed, Cream residents back in the day who, they knew, like you were saying, like they knew how to read a room more than anything.
Yeah, I almost think it's two different schools of thought. It's like there's the people like Digweed or Sasha who, they're used to the super long sets and reading a room and adapting. But then you have a lot of artists who are playing at festivals now where it's more solely focused on the presentation of their art. And so maybe they're playing those tracks in a specific order and you might not like it, but like that's the art that they want to showcase in that moment. That's their identity. Their interest isn't in about making everyone come along on the journey with them. Their interest is in showing you 100% what they do, like a very pure representation of who they are. And yeah, maybe you hate it, but like that's to them their vision. So
well, I mean,
I don't
different.
Yeah.
It's just different. I mean, again, because I come at it like I'm totally ruined, and I'm totally biased, and I'm totally old. Do you know what I mean? So I understand that that's my opinion is probably in the vast minority. You know, again, I'm not one of these guys who's like, well, it's not as good as it used to be. You know, I'm not one of those guys at all. But you know, it's interesting just to see how the culture's changed around that.
Yeah, well, I think it should be a mix of both. It's like you can't go too far in either direction. Like you want to be able to retain your artistic integrity and play the stuff that challenges the crowd, but you're also an entertainer. It's like people are showing up, they're paying their hard money, whatever, to be there, and they're there for a show or to dance or to have fun. So it's like it can't all be just solely in the pursuit of high art, because, you know, at that point it's almost like self-masturbatory. You're just like, look how cool and artistic and different I am. So it's like
exactly.
It's somewhere in the middle for sure.
It's such a balance, man. It really, really is. So yeah, thank you for showing us an authentic expression of your own art with us this evening, dude. It's been so much fun.
No problem. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and it's so great to kind of like do this because, again, you know, as I've said through all of these streams, that I've kind of highly deliberately just invited all of my friends on them.
Yeah.
Because like this is the type of thing we'd be doing in LA anyway if I was in the room with you right now.
Yeah, it's true. Or we'd be walking around Venice, drinking some tea or coffee, talking about artistic integrity and film scores.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Exactly. So why not combine everything and do it remotely, right?
Yeah,
fantastic. So Lotus Eater's out tomorrow on Yoshitoshi, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it'll be on Beatport and Spotify and all that stuff. And yeah, excited to get it out. And also just wanted to say, Paul, like, really thank you for having me on and, you know, giving me a platform to show a bit of my process. And, you know, it's been really cool just to stay connected with you from all the years we met. And you've seen me go from someone who didn't have any artist project and was still kind of learning the ropes to like launching the project, you know, and we've now played shows together and stuff and even been in the studio. So I'm grateful to you just for your friendship over the years and for having me be a part of this.
Much appreciated, and it's true evidence that, you know, the Padawan eventually does become the Jedi. And I'm not saying that because I've got a Star Wars t-shirt on, but it's just it fits perfectly, dude. It really, really does. And you know, it's just been great to witness your journey and you know, see you take all of the wisdom that has obviously been imparted on you, and you've really integrated it, and you've really moved on, and you've really applied it in a beautiful way. And again, I love what you said before about the fact that, you know, you almost turned pro and didn't even realize that you'd turned pro.
Yeah.
Just through that development, that ceaseless sort of development that you've got to put into yourself. And I think you're an amazing example of what we try and preach here at MYT, which is, you know, in order to become the best artist you can be, you've also got to become the best version of yourself.
Oh my God, it's so true. Yeah, it's like my whole artistic journey coincided with my whole journey of getting more into my health and getting a better routine, you know, and taking care of myself. And it's all tied together for sure.
No, it has to be. I mean, exactly. You know, and obviously, you know, there's room for a little bit of chaos and a little bit of madness, but you know, I tend to find that I kind of make my best art when I'm like, you know, the best, you know, in the best state I am. I mean, you know, and that kind of thing. So so man, amazing stuff, man. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more streams, especially the ones where you don the NASA outfit. I really enjoy the astronaut vibe that you're giving off, you know. So
the spaceman.
Have you got any more live streams planned for the near future?
Yeah, I'm gonna do one with the guys over at When We Dip, I believe next week.
Oh, nice.
And then definitely doing some more ones with my friends over at Desert Hearts, and you know, maybe some more studios or something. Who knows? But I'm in it for the long term, the live streaming stuff. So I'll definitely be doing a lot more.
I think that's a massive change in the industry, isn't it? I think that it's been necessary, obviously, with the situation, but I think there's definitely going to be a real feature of the industry and the scene going forward now.
For sure. Yeah, it's like another way for us to gather and for the community to continue to build and, experience shows. So it's definitely here for the long term.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we look forward to seeing what you do in the future. Looking forward to hearing a lot more music and, integrating the Moog into the setup for DJing, which I think is going to be a really nice, interesting, novel way forward. And thanks once again.
Cool. Well, thank you, Paul. And, it's great to catch up with you and great to hear your voice. And I hope you're doing well over there on your side.
Oh, my God. I've got a Liverpool accent. Not many people say they're happy to hear my voice. Do you know what I'm saying? No, normally people can't even understand me.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. We did an interview with Christoph a few weeks ago, and it was literally comments going, I would love this conversation if I had any idea what either of them are saying.
Yeah. Gotta get the subtitles. Yeah.
I might just hire it. Like, I was gonna hire an interpreter for the next time I get like me and Christoph in the studio together, because people can't understand it. Like, but great stuff. All right, guys. Well, that'll do it tonight for MYT Live, and that's been another fantastic stream. We've got more coming. We're going to announce some more in the next week or so. We've got actually Michael's one of Michael's collaboration partners in Amma. We were meant to do it last week, but we had a few difficulties that we meant that we had to reschedule. So we're rescheduling that. I'm going to announce that soon. And we've got a couple of really tasty ones coming up in June before we take a little break for the summer. So keep it locked on our YouTube channel. Give that a like. Smash that like button, as they like to say on these things. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Find us on Twitch. Find us on Facebook. Make your transition. And keep it locked for plenty more to come. Have a great day, evening, night, morning, wherever you're watching, and I'll see you soon. Take it easy, guys.